Hello, welcome to the Bookcase with me, Manoj Tripathi. This is the last section of the program. Is the review section, and this week we're going to take a look at one of the new releases available in the local bookshops here. It's called The Ideal Man, written by Mr. Joshua Kolansik. This is the story of Jim Thompson, who is widely recognized as the Seal King. This is not supposedly a biography of the man himself, but it's a study of the relation between Siam and the United States in turbulent periods in the Thai political history. We are talking about the Cold War periods here in the 1940s and 1950s, and central to that relations was Mr. Jim Thompson, the man remembered for founding Thai Seal Company known as Jim Thompson. We have seen so many titles touching on the same subject in recent years. But this book is supposed to be a more in-depth study of the subject. Even though it doesn't offer anything new in terms of the mysterious disappearance of Thompson, but the author has put together, a vast amount of material surrounding his personal life, based on letters, interviews with those close to him. So the image of Thompson that I think has come through this book is a man of complex, complicated character, a man with people may know him from his Jim Thompson Thai house, but there's a darker side to this character as well, and which is covered in detail in this particular book. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the background of the period in which Thompson arrived in the Land of Smile in the mid-1940s. That was when Thailand was being led by a number of prominent political leaders. We are talking about Pridi Phnom Yong, who was ousted in a coup by a number of military strongmen. For example, Mr. General Prak Pibun Songkham, who was extensively covered and discussed in this book, which makes this book read more like a study of Thai political history rather than a biography of Mr. Jim Thompson. And there are some interesting descriptions in this book anyway. First, we need to take a look at the a key issue in this book. Joshua discusses essential issues here. Firstly, he discusses the relation between Siam and the United States back then, and there are underlying issues about this as well, which is the clandestine activities conducted by Jim Thompson when he left the OSS later in his career. And this is where we got some interesting information from Joshua, who's relies on a number of letters Thompson wrote to family members like his niece, his wife, his mom, and his colleagues and friends. I think it's hard to come to a clear-cut conclusion about this man and what he was up to in that period. But interestingly, there are some facts that you need to know. Firstly, Thompson is not just antique collector, a lover of Thai culture and art. In this book, as you know, he aspires as well. But more than that, there's the lesser known aspects of his professional and personal life. one of the things that I like to mention is that the reason, one of the things I like to mention is that there's a few reasons that contributed to his downfall in Thailand. Firstly, in this book, Joshua reveals reasons that might put him in danger while in Thailand, and that might explain the reason for his mysterious disappearance into the Cameron Highland in Malaysia in 1967. And that reason is this. One section of the book mentions that at one point in his career, Thompson became so much disillusioned with the CIA and the foreign policy of the US government that he turned against the CIA and the government. And this could be one of the reasons why he was under surveillance by the US authorities. And this is one theory. There's another theory that explains his downfall and his eventual disappearance. And this theory is quite convincing in my idea. And in this book, and Joshua got a quote from Anne Donaldson, who is the niece of Mr. Jim Thompson. Donaldson mentioned that the disappearance of Thompson has a lot to do with what she terms a murder for hire organized by some people in our capital city. That means maybe local officials and officers might have had a hand in the disappearance of Mr. Jim Thompson during his Easter holiday in the Cameron Highland. Whatever the reason, it's hard to conclude, because there's no evidence that tells you that Thompson disappears into the forest because of one particular reason. There are many interpretations about his disappearance, but I think the most convincing comes from his niece, as I just mentioned. And I think this book is quite an interesting read for people who are interested in the political history of the country. And you will learn a lot about the background of Thailand in the 1940s and 1950s, especially interesting descriptions about all the generals and about the Siamese atrocities that happened on the Thai soil in the 1940s and in the 1950s. And you wouldn't believe it that how politicians use a number of methodologies to kill their political opponents in that era. So if you would like to know more about Jim Thompson, this could be an interesting book that will provide you with some essential information about the man and about Thailand in the Cold War period and the chaos that ensues. I hope you enjoy reading this book anyway. That's it for me for Bookcase this week. See you next week in Bookcase, which we're trying to get people, interesting personalities, to come to the show and let you know what's happening in the international book world. Bye-bye. See you next time.
ASEAN TV, 10 nations, one vision.